welcome to the PERRLA Office Hours webinar for April 2022. I've got a series of 5 questions that we tend to get from customers, that we just see from a lot of people, especially people who are new to using Word, or they're in, Morris, I feel your pain of being in the middle of a dissertation, in the middle of an advanced paper. I got some topics that are going to cover the gamut here. And so without any further ado, I'm just gonna hop right in. One of the things that many of our students who are going back to school and haven't worked with Microsoft Word in a long time come in and they ask us, said, hey, I wrote a paper, I saved it, it was great, and now I've gone back to Word and I have no idea where it is. Where did my paper go? And this is one of the things that it's a real misconception, even for some of our older, our longtime users, because in the old software, PERRLA used to save and manage saving your paper for you. However, for about 3 years now, PERRLA has kind of gotten out of that game. We live inside of Microsoft Word as a Microsoft Word add-in, but wherever you save the paper, that's where your paper lives. And luckily, we don't have any control or contact with where papers get saved. So you can save your paper to your desktop, into folders, into Google Drive, into OneDrive, into Dropbox. You can put them on a thumb drive. You can make copies and print. Anything you can do with the normal Word file, you can do with a paper that was created using Microsoft Word. And one of the things I think that really trips students up is that Microsoft Word wants you to use Microsoft's services. So when I've got just a new paper open here. If I go File and then Save As, by default, it's going to try to save all of my papers into the Microsoft OneDrive, which is attached to the Office 365 account or the Microsoft Word account that I've logged into inside of Word. And this doesn't always show up as an actual folder on your computer. And so people think, hey, I've gone in and I've saved this paper and I just did File, Save As, and I have no idea where that paper has gone since then. Well, 9 times out of 10, that paper got saved into Microsoft's OneDrive for your Office account. And it's going to be able to access it through Microsoft Word. One way that you can do that the most easily is through the Recents option. So whenever you're in Microsoft, if you're on a Mac, you can go File and then you can open Recent, and it's going to give you a list of all the papers that you've opened recently. And I bet your paper is going to be in there. But if you're on a Windows computer, you have an additional Home ribbon tab over here that when you click that, it's going to show you a list of all of your recent papers. And that's the easiest way to find a recent paper. Now, if you don't want to save your paper into the Microsoft OneDrive, you can go File, Save As, just like we did a second ago. And instead of choosing OneDrive right here or doing anything, you can choose either on my Mac or on my PC. And that's going to open up what looks like the more traditional file browser, where I can save this file anywhere on my computer, however I want. So that's sort of the first question we get is, where did my paper save? And it's wherever Word saved it. Luckily, Microsoft handles all of that, and PERRLA doesn't deal with it at all when it comes to the add-in. Now, as Cliff showed before, PERRLA Online, all of your PERRLA Online papers live inside of our PERRLA Online web application. So anytime you save your paper, it's out there. And we have backups of it, and we keep safe copies. So no matter what, we're going to be able to help you get access to that paper when you're writing it through PERRLA Online. So that is our first question here. Make sure. All right, so let's check out our next one. Can I create other types of papers? For a long time now, PERRLA has created research papers, and then we added the ability to add discussion posts. And for a lot of our students, especially over the past 2 years, where a lot of students have been working online, discussion posts have been a really critical part of your school experience. You're having to interact with your students and your professor through these online forums. And PERRLA has been able to create those research papers and discussion posts for a while. And so when I go into the PERRLA add-in, and this is going to be the exact same thing inside of PERRLA Online, when I go to create a paper, we're going to have a couple of options. So research paper is the first option that we get, and that is what Cliff covered. It's your traditional paper that's got a title page, a body section, and then a references section at the end. And you can add anything to that paper, from abstracts, tables of contents, tables, figures, and appendices. A discussion post is like a condensed version of a research paper. It's just going to have a title and then the body and references all on one single page. That way you can copy and paste that document, that paper with the title, body, what you've written, and the references into a discussion board really easily. You don't have to worry about page breaks or having extra formatting or things that you really just don't need in that paper. So it's going to be like a condensed version of a research paper. Now, there's two other types of papers that we've added fairly recently. One is a reference list. A reference list is exactly what it sounds like. It is a list of references. So I've got let me open up here. This is a different PERRLA paper. A reference list is going to have just the references section inside of the paper. There's no title, there's no body. It is just a list of the references. And so you're not going to be able to add things like an abstract or a table of contents because there's no body in it. But when you go into the references and citations panel for a reference list, you're going to be able to continue to add all of the references and things that you need for your PERRLA Online paper. Next up, annotated bibliography. And an annotated bibliography is a lot like a reference list, except the references will include annotations by default. So, you know what? Let's actually create an annotated bibliography and you'll be able to get a sense of what we have here. So let's call this Office Hours Annotated Bibliography, and we're going to make sure we choose the APA 7th edition format. I'm going to create this, and it's going to start off with just our title at the top of the page. So now I need to go into PERRLA and I need to add some references to my annotated bibliography because right now I don't have any, so there's nothing in there. So let's add some references from my library. Let's start out by adding, let's find some Bigfoot references here. Great. All right, so let's add this bomb reference. So I'm going to add it, and you can see it's going to automatically add a space where I can type the annotation for my paper. Let's add this Bellamy reference, this Billsley one, and then let's go way down here, and we've got one by Porter right there. So you can see it adds all of these references to my paper, and each of them fit inside of one of those PERRLA content controls that Cliff was talking about that allows us to keep track of the reference inside the paper and make sure that it's edited properly. And then we also have a place where we can type the annotation. Now, an annotation is just a short explanation of why you need this reference. So for this one, we may say Baum discusses the linguistic differences between Yeti populations. Sure. And so that's what my annotation does. It sort of explains why I've included this reference in my paper. So these are two new reference types, two new paper types, that PERRLA has added in the past year that really make it a lot easier to create all the different types of papers that students need. So when you're creating a paper in the PERRLA Microsoft Word add-in or in PERRLA Online, you can create research papers, discussion posts, reference lists, and annotated bibliographies all from the same spot. All right. Question number 3, how can I turn in my paper for edits with my professor? You know, one of the things that we get asked a lot is that, how do I turn this in without my professor knowing I use PERRLA? Well, a lot of professors themselves use PERRLA, and so they really don't care that you're using a software like PERRLA to help you make sure that your paper is formatted the way they want it to be formatted. However, there are a few persnickety, grumpy professors who had to do their APA formatting the hard way. And they want their students to have to suffer through the APA formatting the same way that they did. And well, that's just not fair. So we always recommend, you can turn in a simplified version of or a clean copy of your paper. So if you're inside of PERRLA Online, for instance, so let me open up this paper here. And this is what Cliff showed a little bit ago, is we can always export or download a simplified Word file. So that's just going to be just a Word file with just the text and none of the PERRLA content controls. Or inside of Microsoft Word, when we're using the add-in, we can go to the paper review panel in here. And here we're going to have the ability to create a clean copy. So you can see in this paper, I have these blue boxes. Those are the content controls that PERRLA uses to keep track of information in your paper. If I click create a clean copy, we're going to take and create a new copy of the paper that has all the exact same content, all the exact same formatting that it did originally, but none of those content controls are there. So it's just plain text. Now, when it comes to editing a paper, this ability becomes really helpful because many professors like to use a feature called track changes inside of Word documents to track all of the changes that they're making to your paper or suggesting to their paper while they're working. Now, inside of a Word document, one of the things that you need to know about track changes is that it lives sort of above the text. So if we think about a Word document, there's kind of 3 layers to any Word document, whether you're using PERRLA or whether you've created it on your own. The bottom layer is like all the behind the scenes stuff, all the hidden stuff that Microsoft Word uses to keep track of documents and set properties and all those things. The middle layer, that's where the actual paper lives, like the actual content, what you've written in the body, what you're writing in the annotations, and so forth. And then there's a third layer that kind of lays on top of that, where you can sort of interact with different elements. And content controls live in that third layer. They live above, kind of laid on top of, like you see here, this text. Well, review changes or track changes, and that lives in the review tab here. What it allows you to do, if I'm going to turn this on, is if I make a Sasquatch today, I make an edit where I've deleted the journal name and then I wanted to replace it. It's going to allow me to keep track of all the new changes that I make in the paper. And many professors really like this. And you can see why there's some real benefit here is because I can see what's changed inside this document from when I started to what I'm giving you. However, these track changes also live in that same top layer on a paper that the content controls live on. And the different parts of those layers can sometimes interfere with one another and can sometimes fight to sort of occupy the same space. So if you have a paper that you need to submit to your professor or you need to submit to a committee, and they're going to be making changes and edits and suggestions to your paper, we always suggest that you use the clean copy feature, where you download a simplified version of that paper to submit for edits. Then your professor can take and they can make all the edits that they want. They can use track changes. They can leave comments in the paper, everything that would be normal. And then they're going to send it back to you. However, this simplified document doesn't work with PERRLA because those content controls that can interfere with review changes are also necessary for PERRLA to work. That's how we know where those references are. It's how we know where those citations are, where the different parts of your paper exist. And so we need to make sure we keep a version of that paper handy that does work with PERRLA, especially if we're going to need to continue working on that paper in the future. I really think about people who are doctoral students or students who are doing a capstone or a master's thesis. This is a paper that you have to turn in and it has to go through review processes and edits over and over, and you're going to continue working on it at the same time. So what's really helpful is by having this clean copy, it is just that. It's a copy of the original paper. So here I have my original paper right here. And then I've got the clean copy that I've turned in to my professor for edits that they've then returned to me. So now I can take and I can say, oh, I need to make sure I update that journal article. Great. Let's come over here into PERRLA. I'm going to open up this reference. It's loading my thing. My thing is slow because it's also doing all the buffering for the video. I'm going to edit this reference so that instead of PsyCritics, it was Sasquatch Today. Update my reference because I have this content control here. PERRLA knows where that reference is, and it's going to make sure that it takes and it updates it correctly. That should have stayed right there. And then I can say, okay, you know what? I've gotten that. I've done it. So I'm going to accept that change and it's done. It's finished. Let me go to the next one. All the new changes that I make. Okay, I need to add that sentence. All the new changes that I make. So I have two versions of my paper when I'm going to be going through an editing process with somebody. I've got the version that I'm going to work with that works with PERRLA. That's sort of my working version. It's the one that's important. And then when I have a paper that I need to submit for edits, I'm going to create a copy. And in particular, I'm going to create a clean copy where I'm going to download a simplified Word file, a simple version of that paper that doesn't have all the PERRLA stuff in it, but I can give that to somebody else. And they can go to town making edits or changes or anything like that. And I know it's not affected my copy, the version that works with PERRLA that I'm going to need to continue to work. And I need to make sure all the formatting is correct. So if you have a paper that you're going to be working on with somebody else or that you need to get edits on or feedback on, make sure that you're always giving them a copy of your paper and that you're keeping the actual version sort of safe and clean. And then you're bringing those edits over one at a time as it's like, yeah, I do need to make that change. Or, you know what? I don't need to make that change. I'm glad that I've left it exactly how it is inside my document. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, shout at me in the chat and I'll dive into it a little bit more. All right. Let's go into our next question here. Why is there a typo in the web page reference that I just searched for using PERRLA? So Cliff showed this a little bit ago that when you're creating references with PERRLA, you can search for those references using a DOI, a digital object identifier, an ISBN number. You can also search for those references using a URL or the author and the title of the work. So let's go through and let's search for a reference. Oh, I'm not going to add a reference to my library. I'm going to search for a new reference. So create a new reference. And here I can look up a reference just like Cliff did a bit ago. I'm going to take, and I've got a, let's grab this DOI right here. Paste that in and I'm going to search for this work. Great. It's a journal article. And this same question applies for journal articles and for websites and books. If you search for a DOI, we're going to be able to identify if the work you're looking at is a book or a journal article. If you search by ISBN, well, ISBNs are only associated with books, so you can only create a book. If you search with a URL, we're going to look at it as a web page because URLs are predominantly used for web pages. If that URL has a DOI inside of it, like it's a journal article you're looking at online, we're going to take and strip out that DOI and search for it there because we're going to get more accurate information and because we're going to be able to format it as a journal. All that aside, anytime you search for a reference, in this case, we search for a journal article, this information that we pull back, that we're pre-populating the reference form with, we've gotten from publishers. Publishers take and they have these international massive databases where anytime they go to publish something new, they take and they share the publication's information, so the article's information, with the database. In this case, we used a DOI, and the largest database of DOIs in the world is a place called Crossref. We go out and we search Crossref's database for the DOI. And Crossref comes back and says, hey, I found it. Here is the author. Here's the title. Here's the journal name. Here's the date it was published. Here's the page numbers. Gives us all that we can take and put into your reference form. Now, the great thing about that is that you don't have to type it, right? Saves you a lot of time, a lot of hassle in trying to fill out the form. However, that's information that was also provided by the publisher. And you know what? Publishers, unfortunately, are also human and will occasionally put typos into their information. That's why whenever we pull back information from a third party, from a database like Crossref, we always show it to you. That way you can look at it and ensure that what the publisher has provided the database that we're pulling from them matches the work that you have in front of you. So I can review this and say, you know what, Edward, Simon, Why Sasquatch and Other Crypto Beasts Haunt Our Imaginations, Anthropology of Consciousness, 2017. Oh, you know what? That's actually supposed to be 2016. And the publisher accidentally may have typed in the wrong information. But because I'm reviewing it I can make sure, yep, that matches, that matches. I need to make sure that this matches what I have in hand. So I can update that, and then I can move on and create next. This is it. It's perfect. It's going to create my reference for me, and then it's going to add it into my paper exactly where it needs to be. So why is there a typo in a reference that you search for? Well, unfortunately, it's because other humans created that reference somewhere else, and we need to make sure that they're doing their job as good as we're doing ours. But it doesn't happen very often, but we always show it to you just in case. All right, great. Checking again. No questions still. Feel free to shout them out, okay? The next question that we get for a bit in some variation or other is, I'm terrible with passwords. Who isn't? Can I just keep PERRLA open on my computer forever? Sure. Technically, yeah, you can have PERRLA Online open and you're going to stay logged into PERRLA Online for up to 180 days. That's 6 months. We don't log you out for 6 months. However, we don't recommend that. There's sort of two reasons. One, we're constantly making improvements to PERRLA. We've got a team that's working all the time on making this as good and as fast and reliable and as innovative a product as it can be. And so when you just keep it logged in all the time, your computer will be much slower at picking up all the new changes or things that we're doing. And so it's always a really good idea that when you're done writing, close it. Go ahead. Your paper's saved. Go ahead and close PERRLA. You can always get to PERRLA anytime by going to PERRLAonline.com. That's the direct link into the online editor, or logging in at PERRLA.com. So if I just go to PERRLAonline.com, that's going to take me to the home dashboard, where we will land right here whenever you log in. If you go to PERRLA.com, you can also go log in here. You can log into your account, and then this button right here in the middle, PERRLA Online. That's going to take you to straight to the dashboard right here the exact same way. So you can leave it open, but we don't recommend it because every time that when you close and reload it, it's going to make sure it loads the latest version of PERRLA Online. That's going to have all the great things that we're constantly doing to improve it. The second reason that you may want to close your paper when you're done is that if you're using PERRLA Online, lots of times you may be writing from multiple computers. If you're trying to sneak in a little bit of schoolwork over a lunch, or while you're at the school library, or while you're home, that's 3 different computers where you could be accessing PERRLA Online. And that's a great way to write papers and a great way to work with PERRLA. However, you always want to make sure that your paper is closed and is only open in one computer sort of at a time. So if I've got this paper open here on this computer, and then I go into an office, or I go to the library and I open this paper up there, the paper is going to be open on both computers. And what can happen is that the computer at home is trying to save a copy of the paper. And then the paper at the library is also trying to save a copy of that paper. And you kind of get in a situation where the saves from different computers will start to overlap and try to compete with one another. And it can get really confusing for some users. So our best recommendation is just when you're done working on your paper at a computer, close it. You can go back to the home dashboard, so you don't have to close the tab altogether, but make sure that you get out of that paper when you're done using it on that computer. That just helps keep everything up to date all across the board, and it's also going to ensure that you're getting all the latest updates and things from us. So perfect, good. So there's that question for us. We got just one or two more. This is the last one, and I saved the biggest for last. And it has to do with appendices. This is a question we've gotten a couple times in the past couple of weeks: is how can I reorder my appendices, or the content in my appendices, after I've created them? So an appendix, like Cliff showed earlier, and I'm going to go over to this paper. No, not this one here. Like, close out of some of these. Don't save that one either. And I'm not going to save that one, this paper here. So this is a nice paper, similar to what Cliff was looking at earlier. We got table of contents, the body, and then the reference section here at the end. And then I've got some appendices down here. So I have Appendix A, Appendix B, C, and Appendix D, all right here at the end of my paper. And say, I've got this, I'm feeling really good about it. Well, one of the requirements of appendices in APA and MLA is that the appendices appear in the paper in order that you talk about them. So the first appendix that you mention in the body of your paper, that's going to be Appendix A. The second appendix you talk about, that's Appendix B. The third one is Appendix C, and so forth. So that way they're in order of when a reader would encounter them in your paper. There's some real logic there. However, what happens if suddenly I've got to go back and edit and my professor says, hey, you really should add another appendix in here that covers this, or that has to do with that. And it's going to be between Appendix A and Appendix B. So it would be the second appendix that shows up in your paper. So it really should be Appendix B. And that means that Appendix B really should be Appendix C, and Appendix C should be D, and D should be E. And it can be kind of confusing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the process of adding an appendix to a paper works, and then how you can reorganize any appendices you may have. So maybe you don't need to add a new appendix, but you need to take everything that's in Appendix B, and it actually needs to go to the end of the paper because you've moved your paper's content around, and it's now going to be Appendix D. How do we handle that? So let's talk first about how appendices are added into your paper. Now, whether you are using PERRLA for Word here, or Word add-in, or if you are inside of PERRLA Online, you have the Appendix tab. And then when you add an appendix here, that appendix is always going to get added at the end of the paper. So in PERRLA Online, I can click Add Appendix down here at the bottom, or I can click Add an Appendix in the Appendix panel. And that appendix always gets appended to the end of the document. And that same thing is true here inside of Microsoft Word. When I open up Appendix, I don't have the little button at the end down here like I do in PERRLA Online. So I can go add an appendix here at the end. And I'm going to get a new appendix at the very end of the paper, which is Appendix E. Great. So appendices are always added at the end of a document. So that's the first thing to know when you need to create a new appendix. You're going to add it, and that's exactly where it's going to be. So let's say this is the content for what will be the second appendix in the paper. Now, you may be tempted right now to go, ooh, let me come in here and change this title to Appendix B and start making all these changes. There's an easier way, and PERRLA is going to help you handle that. In fact, that Appendix E, you can't change it because that's a APA specific formatted part of your paper. So I can't change that E to a B because it's locked, because it's explicitly said to be that way in APA. Here's how we're gonna do this. This needs to be the second appendix in the paper. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the Home ribbon tab inside of Microsoft Word. And I'm going to turn on this button right here. I hope you can see this. It looks like a little backwards P symbol. This is a sign for paragraph, but it's also the button for show and hide hidden characters. So inside of your entire paper, every single character, whether you can see it or not, is accounted for. So for instance, if I zoom in here, you can see I've got this space right here. If I have this turned off, those spaces are just invisible, right? You just don't see them. But I'm going to turn this on and I can see that space. It makes those hidden characters inside my document visible. And that's really important when you go to start working and moving. Let me zoom back in here. When you go to start working on your paper sections, because there are also hidden characters like this. This is a page break. What it tells Microsoft Word is that once I get to this spot, go to the next page before typing more content. So instead of adding a bunch of blank interspaces, which become really problematic, especially in long papers, where if you just have manual breaks between all of your pages, You make one change 10 pages up, suddenly pages 15 and 25 and all the way down your paper get messed up. We use page breaks to make sure that those breaks stay even and consistent, and you're not going to be sort of shooting yourself in the foot by going up and editing page 3, and suddenly that changes the entire cascade of your paper. This keeps it nice and simple. But this is hidden without those hidden things shown. So we're going to turn on the hidden characters. Now it's going to be a lot easier to take and move this appendix where it needs to be. All right. So there's a metaphor I'm going to try to throw out here, and hopefully it makes some sense. Appendices, we're going to think about our paper like a train. Okay. You've got the title page at the front, and then every section of your paper is a new car in the train, right? So you get your title page. That's the car at the front, the engine. Then you're going to have your body. That's another car. It's all one long section. Okay. Maybe a long car, maybe a short car, but it's one car. Then you're going to have your reference section. That's another car. Now we have some appendices. That's a car. Each appendix is a different car. These breaks happen between each of those sections. So between the title page and the body, if we go to the very top, the document, there's a section break. It's just a different type of page break. Between the table of contents, which is also a card, there is a section break. Between the body and the reference section, there is a section break right here, that double line. These section breaks happen between every major component in the paper, and they're like the little connectors of a train. So like all the things that hold little cars together, these little section breaks are what go in between each of the major sections. So if you're going to take a train and you're going to take the car that's at the end and move it to the middle, you need to make sure that you're moving the thing that connects the car to the other cars with it. If you left the connectors behind, the train's going to break in half. It's just not going to work right. The same thing is true here in an appendix. And I really hope that makes sense, is that we need to move the car, which is the content of the appendix, as well as the connector, the thing that connects it to the other car, in this case, the car in front of it. So I need to make sure that I take this break here along with the appendix content as I move it where it's supposed to be, which is the second appendix in this paper. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a nifty little keyboard trick here. I'm going to place my cursor in front of the page break. So I'm going to place it at the beginning of what I want to cut out of my paper here, right there. Now I'm going to come down to the bottom and I'm going to press and hold the shift key on my keyboard. Okay. And then I'm going to just click where I want the end of the content I need to move. So that was, I placed my cursor in front of the page break because I need to move that connector along with the car. I held shift on the keyboard and then I clicked the end of what I wanted to highlight. Now I can let off of the shift key and it's going to have highlighted all of that content. Okay. Let's now we're going to cut that content out of our paper. So I'm going to right click, cut. All right. Now it's gone. It's in my clipboard. I've cut it out of the paper. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to paste it in to where I want. So it's like I've taken the car off of the train. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to stick it in the spot where it's supposed to be. We wanted this to be the second appendix in our paper. And so it needs to go right here after Appendix A. Now, if we remember, we cut the page break and the content. So if we put our cursor here at the beginning of Appendix B or after this page break, you're going to have Appendix A, then a page break, then a page break, then the content that we pasted, and then Appendix B. And that's not the order that we want these things. We want them to alternate between page break, content, just like a train. You want the connector and the car, the connector and the car. So I'm going to place my cursor right here, right in front of the page break on Appendix A, because I want this to come after, which is going to be Appendix B. So we can place it there or here. I'll place it right here, and I'm going to paste. What that does is it will paste the page break I had cut before at the end, and my Appendix E, which was the car at the end. And then it has at the end of it now, the page break that I was right in front of, and then Appendix B here in the same spot. So now we've got these things set up in the right spot. we've got the car and the connector, the content and the brake, the content and the brake, content and brake. However, this is still Appendix E, and this one is still Appendix B. In PERRLA, we're going to be able to fix that for you. So inside the appendix panel, there's a blue button right here, refresh appendix names. What this does is it's going to go through and look at your appendices, and it's going to name the first appendix, the first appendix, Appendix A, the second appendix, Appendix B, the third appendix, Appendix C, and so forth. So if you had Appendix F, then Appendix G, then Appendix A, then Appendix B, by refreshing the appendices names, we're going to go through and make them A, B, C, D, and so forth. So I'm going to click that. See it happen? Happen just there. That Appendix E is now Appendix B, as in boy. What was Appendix B, as in Bob, is now Appendix C, as in Carl, and C is D, and D is now E at the very end. So we've moved the appendices content from the end of our paper to the proper spot inside the paper. That's how you can move an appendix around inside of a final section. The last thing that you need to do when you're moving these appendices around is making sure that the call out that you're using inside your paper. So where you've said see Appendix A or see Appendix B inside the paper, that matches the new order of appendices in your paper. That's really critical. You don't want to say, go look at Appendix B and it's somewhere like Appendix G. Make sure that once your appendices are reordered and are renamed properly, that you've also checked inside the body of the paper to make sure that all the names and the callouts for those appendices match up correct. So that's this is one of those really complicated things that hopefully you rarely have to do. But anytime you go to do something that's pretty complex inside of Microsoft Word, one, doing it in a Word is really helpful. But two, always turn on this hidden character button. Being able to see what's going on inside of your paper, all the little hidden bits, is going to make formatting your paper and getting to the correct spot that you want to be at the end and it all being formatted correctly so much easier. You really will not believe how much I usually just leave this on all the time because it is a true life saver. So that's how you move an appendix around. And that's it. Those are our common questions. We're here every day until 10 p.m. like Cliff was talking about earlier. Our support team is out of this world. They're fantastic. I cannot be prouder of them and the work that they do. You can contact us by emailing us directly at support@perrla.com, or you can check out our help center at perrla.com/help. We have a number of answers and articles and tutorials and stuff like that that's out there. But we are just happy to help any way that we can. I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with us during our office hours. If you ever have any more questions, like I mentioned, we're here. We want to help. And if not, good writing, and we'll talk to you soon.